Welcome. Appreciate everyone's time this afternoon, this morning, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Not quite sure what number this is, but we've been doing these for the past 12 months or so, and Cam has graciously agreed to come back after the first session that he did last year was a huge success. We asked him back, and I think during the last year's conversation, we were talking about security and all those kind of things, and you were working on a security kind of presentation, and this is it. So with that, I'll hand straight over to yourself, Cam.
Absolutely. Well, it's very nice to be back. I do go by Cam. It is my initials for Kevin A. McGrail. The key thing that I will tell you here is this presentation, the way I've chosen to do it today. I feel like this group is peers and colleagues. So I thought I would show you a little bit of the scariness about how my brain works and how I develop presentations so that they are ready for prime time. Let me see if I can make this full screen at least. So this started out, one of the things to let you know when I write any type of presentation or blog, one of the first things I do is I sit down generally with like Notepad and I just write out what my ideas are. So my outlines start there. Key reason I do that, first of all, is that there's never any questions about provenance on the data or that it's my ideas. And another thing that I pride myself on doing is I try to write presentations that are not just something you're going to find on the internet. You're not going to be able to go find a top 25 list of Google Workspace Security, and it's going to mimic this. So I kind of hope that maybe you've already done that, and that now you're looking for kind of my extra tips on top of that. Some of these will be basic because there's some that are so important. But you know, the idea here is it's top 25. I will say 25-ish. I think it's around 32 to 40 when I finally got done writing it. I wrote it out originally saying I'm going to write down 25 of them, and then it just kept growing, and then I started looking at ones to take out. But a little bit about me. I work at a company called Dido. They are a Google Premier Partner. That's my day job. I've also done a lot of neat things. I was the winner of MOG's Mary Latinsky Lifetime Achievement Award for helping keep the internet safe. So I do a lot with cybersecurity and have done so for decades. I've done everything from US federal agencies, bringing the first federal agency onto Google's cloud and helping them get their authority to operate as well as Google for that project. And ever since then, I believe I'm also probably the only person, I'm sure of it. There's only 9 people that have ever held the Google Workspace product top contributor GDE status. That's not really an active one anymore, but I am a GDE for Workspace, for AI, ML, as well as for cloud. And on top of that, I've been using AI since really the mid to late 90s. So for me, AI and everything that Gemini is doing now is really cool. You'll see at least one Gemini tip in here in my top security tips. But I thought the first thing we would do is kind of run through the headings. And then if there's any particular questions anybody has, you will not throw off my groove to interrupt me and ask a question. If there's any hands raised, if Paul or Molly could let me know, or if there's questions in the chat, I'll happily jump out and answer those. But I thought we would just start with the list first. What are the 32 items? We go all the way down to the bottom. And, you know, and I'll put my information for LinkedIn in chat. I do love LinkedIn and chatting with people. I've been a little busy this last week. So if you've reached out to me before this meeting and didn't get a response, that's just because it's been a crazy week with a blizzard here on the East Coast of the United States. So in any case, with that said, if there's no questions, I will kick it off and we'll talk about these things. And I know number 2 right there, Paul, there's one that's a little controversial. So but number 1, if you're not aware of it, you're not using it. If you have customers not using it, use multi-factor authentication. It stops like 99.99999% of hacks. And it is probably the number 1 thing to start with. It's not bulletproof, but it stops a lot of bullets. But number 2, don't use biometrics. So, excuse me. If you're using concepts like passkeys tied to fingerprints, if you're using face lock, don't use it. We'll come back to that and talk about why. Use dedicated accounts for elevated access. If you have privileged accounts, if you have super admin access, don't make it the same account you use for day-to-day work. That is also your account for elevated access. Exceptions to that are going to be other concepts like sudo and Linux is a great way to use a normal account, and then sudo to your elevated privileges when you need it. There are good methods for handling that. In my opinion, Google Workspace needs to add something to that. Number 4 is really to learn and apply basic cybersecurity concepts. So if you aren't familiar with these 4, they would definitely be where I'd start. So the principle of least privilege, separation of duties, principle of least functionality, and multi-party approval are really important basic cybersecurity concepts, and how to do those in Google Workspace we'll come back to. Stop using passwords, embrace passphrases, and embrace XKCD. I do love bringing up humor. There isn't a ton in this presentation, but you'll definitely see some snarkasm. But if you aren't familiar with XKCD, I think it's xkcd.net. Fantastic comic strip. It's sort of like Dilbert on steroids and taken to the next level. So passphrases in particular, XKCD has some great materials around, is the reason that it's referenced there. The next one, have the right number of super admins. What's that right number? We'll come back to it, but everybody shouldn't be a super admin. Lock down the account recovery features after making sure your users have access, but also considering having a Google Workspace reseller, like what I do at my day job. As a conflict of interest disclosure, I didn't read this up above. Let me jump back up and just go it. I do work at my day job at DynaWeb. I also partner with Spin, who will be mentioned in here, and I have a financial interest in Virtru and PCC, both of which have products mentioned in here as well. So take those things with a grain of salt, but I wouldn't be mentioning them if I didn't believe in the products. So take that with a grain of salt, it's meant. The next one is the Advanced Protection Program. This should really be considered for all executives and super admins, and especially if you had any compromises of sensitive data, any monetary loss, or any compromises of money handlers. That can also be assistance to those people. And didn't mean to have that expanded out. On implementing single sign-on for all third-party apps. Single sign-on is probably one of the biggest ways to increase your security, because it also helps with things like shutting down accounts. The failure to offboard is in this here below as the number 1 or number 2 risk. Email security is usually number 1. Failure to offboard is normally number 2 as far as a security risk. People just don't turn off accounts. SSO makes that just part of the process. Make sure you're reviewing your policies and procedures. You keep improving them. I usually tell people that policies are something that is set usually pretty much in stone. It's changed very rarely, usually set by leadership. Procedures can change daily. They're the people in the weeds implementing the policies. So the policies are the why, the procedures are the how. But they should really be constantly reviewed and constantly improved with a cadence that makes them relevant and current. Creating DLP rules to protect sensitive data, very important. Restrict or at least review external drive sharing. Are you aware of the risks from drive sharing? Are you aware of what you're allowing externally? And have you thought about those risks? Shadow IT, this is one that I really like talking about, especially to groups like this. Shadow IT is something that is avoided mostly by supporting your users. And it's something that's I'm pretty passionate about. And right now, for example, we see a lot of companies, they come to me and they say things like, we've banned using ChatGPT, or banned using Gemini, or banned using these AI tools. And I'm like, yeah, like that's happening. What's happening instead is you just don't have control and visibility into it because you've banned it and they're using it anyway, doing it themselves. So a lot of times avoiding shadow IT is supporting your users in what they want to do, giving them good advice, starting with why. We'll come back to that. On the number 14, audit your third-party apps, look at the APIs connected via OAuth. One joke in here that I will bring up is support inbox amnesty. I really want to get a holiday once a year that's Inbox Amnesty Day, where you're just allowed to delete your inbox. If you're like me and you play Inbox Zero is your favorite video game and you never win, and it's similar to your golf score where it's in the triple digits, That is Inbox Amnesty's goal is, once a year, you can just delete your inbox and somebody says something like, hey, have you gotten to that email I sent you? And you can just be like, no, I'm sorry, it was Inbox Amnesty. I deleted everything. They go, okay, I'll send it to you again. So that's Inbox Amnesty. Otherwise, we'll never finish everything. On number 15, block unvetted browser extensions and marketplace apps. This kind of goes back again to the supporting your users and the shadow ID. You want to support them, but you want to know what's being used. You want to understand the security risks that's in there, and you want your users to understand that you're trying to support them with those risks. Using Google Chrome, I have a feeling this group is not going to find that very difficult, but the big thing I do tell a lot of users over and over again, use dedicated Chrome profiles per account. I cannot tell you how many problems that fixes, just both in functionality, but also in security. If you're using Gemini, for example, and you're using a licensed account, and you go to Gemini, you'd be in a pro account. But if you also have a Gmail account on that profile, there might be a situation where it ends up using the Gmail account, and now you have a data leakage issue. Using dedicated Chrome profiles is a way of preventing so many functionality issues, but also from a cybersecurity standpoint, a leakage, knowing for exact that you're using this particular account, that you're joining meetings with a particular account, that you're creating documents with a particular account, etc. Disabling IMAP and POP access. These are older protocols. I'm not necessarily at the point where they have to be turned off, but using OAuth with them, not using app-specific solutions, and having a pathway to where you'll move away from using them is something you want to consider. That one's kind of a lighter one, but you should be thinking about it. Enabling context-aware access. If you have a SKU that has it, which I believe it's default with Enterprise Plus, as well as some of the other SKUs like Frontline Plus and Education Plus, but you should be using it at least in warn mode. Look at things like IP locations. You can also look at other concepts when we come back to the factors around IP addresses. But the context-aware access can be a great way of limiting your risk, and not enough people use it. Just the concepts of geolocations. If you're in the UK or in the US, do you ever need anybody in Eastern Europe or Russia or China logging into your accounts? China, of course, wouldn't happen. It would be backhauled probably through Hong Kong or a VPN. But the fact of the matter is you probably don't. And limiting your context-aware access to, perhaps only a few countries might be a really, really good way to stop any type of compromise from getting worse. Lowering your session length. So the default is 14 days. That's really too long. I generally recommend it shorter. I actually wish you could go to odd hours. I wish Google would do that. Maybe they will one day. Setting it to like 25 hours would be ideal for me, because then it wouldn't kick me out of my meetings right at 9 o'clock every morning, because I happen to log in very routinely about the same time. But something most people haven't looked at probably is what's known as DVSC, or device-based session control. This is a technology that uses the TPM chips that are built into computers to then lock a session cookie effectively to a specific machine. It's a great way of improving your security. It is a beta, but definitely turn it on. We have client-side encryption tools, or Virtue for Gmail. We have Google's endpoint protection. If you're not using the built-in MDM that's available, it is definitely something you should look at. How to help control your endpoints can come back to pay you a lot of dividends. And I'm sorry, some of these are expanded. I thought I closed them all. But understand how Google Drive for Desktop works. I usually point out that with powerful tools, you can get some security issues. So Google Drive is a wonderful tool, but you should understand how it works, and you should be thinking about what the security risks are. When we're doing cybersecurity, everything about cybersecurity is about risk understanding and risk acceptance. Very, very, very few companies can accept an unlimited budget to fix every risk. Not to mention the fact, I believe his name's David Hughes, has a quote from the FBI that I just love. It's paraphrased. It says, like, there's no such thing as a secure computer. The only secure computer is, turned off, encased in concrete, in steel, buried underground 30 feet with no wires going to it. And even then, I'm not so sure, is roughly a paraphrase of his quote. But, when we're looking at any type of security, we're balancing the risk, we're balancing the budget, we're balancing the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. and understanding what the business impact is for those products. You need to make sure that you're doing these type of solutions. I can make a very secure website where nobody can log into it. It's very secure, but it doesn't meet the requirements of availability, and it doesn't meet or it does meet the requirements of confidentiality. It meets the requirements of integrity, but it fails on availability. You have to do an individual analysis on every system to really understand CIA for it. For example, if I have a public-facing website and I publish press releases on there, I am worried about confidentiality. No, it's public. Am I worried about integrity? Yes, I don't want somebody to come and deface my website or change my press release. And availability, well, availability depends. If I'm running a company that does like 9 to 5 business support and I go down on a weekend for support, probably not a big deal as long as I'm back up on Monday morning. If Amazon or a big e-commerce retailer goes down for an hour, they probably lose millions of dollars. So availability becomes very important to them. So you have to look at CIA or confidentiality, integrity, and availability with all these systems. You have to understand the risks, what risks you're willing to accept, and what kind of data you're handling. We'll talk about data toxicity, I think, in one of these other concepts, or it's in one of these particular subsections. Another big one, making sure your SPF, DKIM, and DMARC are working. Great email, totally free. No marketing or anything will be sent to it. No sales. You can email Dido at emailtester.raptoremailsecurity.com, and you can easily test your emails. I suggest if you're on this call now, I'll go ahead and let me hit F11 and break out of this. I'll put this in the chat right now for you. If you send an email to this, you'll get a response back in a few minutes. And yes, and they had a great one last week as well. This is a quick tool. It'll give you an idea of what's going on in a way that's both technical and simple for a user to follow. And additionally, I'll put in my linkedin.com/in/K McGrail, and I will pin both of those so people who join, I think it's pinned. There we go. Those are both pinned for you. So let me come back to this and come back to F11, make it big screen. All right, so you can test it there, but very, very important. This stops people spoofing and understanding what's going on with what your emails look like to the rest of the world. Confirm Google Vault is configured to retain appropriately. We'll talk a little bit more about appropriately. Vault is not a backup solution. Google is very adamant about that. It is just a pointer to data that's already it's an e-discovery tool. What 24 and 25 we'll talk about a little bit more, I'm sure. Best practices for Gemini. I'll talk about this one right now just because it's probably one of the biggest points. Now, this document right now, this is the draft blog. If you guys have anything that you want to add, if there's any comments you make, I'm going to refine the materials in this to make sure that they're going there. But I want to mention that if you're using a licensed Gemini product, it falls under the same terms and conditions that you have when you're using Workspace. And in particular, that's this right here. All data stays within the protection boundary. No humans review the data. No training or use of the data other than to support the user ephemerally is done. That's the key point. And with Google, they've done a fantastic job. Gemini is bounded by you as the user. It doesn't have any secret backdoors. There's no service accounts. It's using your access as a user to get access to that data. So it's extraordinarily safe to use a licensed product from Google with Gemini, with Workspace, and let your users use it. I would advise, the strictest government agencies that I've worked with in my career, the same advice as well. They've done such a good job on it. We'll come back to the rest of that if we have time. Tabletop exercises. If you're not familiar with them, this is just where you sit down and talk about, we have this problem, how will we deal with it? I like, for example, doing concepts like business continuity planning, and just sitting down. Sometimes it's a 5 or 10 minutes, sometimes it's half an hour. You just sit down and say, what are the particular issues? I'll show an example if we get time. Look at your overall cybersecurity plan. I like to point out to people that when I'm looking at a cybersecurity plan, I oftentimes will start an 18-month plan with a month and a half per 12 phases that I recommend. But those 12 phases largely break down to these categories. And most people really don't think about cybersecurity from all of these phases. You, of course, planning, that makes sense, the implementation, things like, training. But, if you're looking at a complete list, this is usually what I look at to make sure that an entire plan covers all of these concepts. But most people don't have an unlimited budget. Most people don't have clients that will pay for everything. And then on top of it, you may just not have time. So usually if I'm focusing on things, I'm going to focus on continuous monitoring, making sure policies and procedures are being implemented, reviewed, used. I'm going to make sure there's annual cybersecurity reviews and training. And I'm going to make sure that everything focuses on moving the needle. When I want to insult a person in cybersecurity, I will call them a checkbox assessor. It isn't about checking a box. It's about making sure that you're following what the spirit of the rule is. And that's where really good cybersecurity frameworks are written from. So the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the United States, or NIST, writes pretty much the gold standard in cybersecurity frameworks around the world. The NIST 853 is excellent. There are others. But it always tells you that it's the spirit of the thing. And, we have a lot of things when we do authorities to operate that we talk about. If we get some time, I'll show you some of my other ATO-isms. And that could be a good blog or a good topic maybe for another conversation later this year, next year, etc. I do like humor, especially when you're dealing with cybersecurity. You do have to have dad jokes. I talk about it in an article that I'll put the link in the chat if you want to know. It's one of my 2 secrets for cybersecurity, and dad jokes is one of them. Today's dad joke, since we just had a blizzard here, what is a snowman's favorite relative? His Antarctica. There you go. The jokes don't get any better, but the point is a little bit of humor, a little bit of humanization goes a long way when you're dealing with cybersecurity, because you're dealing with oftentimes nothing but negativity, nothing but the dregs of the internet that it can wear on you. So there's a reason I oftentimes bring in jokes. Considering Google Workspace Enterprise Plus, this isn't a sales pitch, but there are quite a few features that get added. The Security Center with the full investigation tool, DLP with Drive and Gmail, security sandboxing, which if you don't have turned on, turn it on ASAP. Context-aware access, which we talked a little bit about, multi-party approval, which we'll come back to, CSE, which we've talked about minorly. You do get the Gemini AI security features, and especially you get data regions control. There are limited regions right now, but Google is adding more of them. The last one I wanted to bring in today is, just kind of a joke, again, that humanization. So I am divorced. I have been getting into dating. I dated about 5 years ago. It was completely horrible. The online stuff was just, I actually talked to the CEO of Spark, which owns a whole bunch of dating platforms. And with my anti-spam and email security background, it was just so much. But I thought you might laugh at some of the ones here today. So this is some of the stuff that I point out to people as they try and get you away from the platform. So for example, you'll notice here they're using weird numbers here. And by the way, that's a real number from a real scam. Feel free to call them and waste their time from some fake number that you've got. But that's the kind of stuff they do. They put it in these weird digits to try and get you off of the platform. This one here, they made their username, a email of @Yahoo. And some friends of mine really like this one. Because there's I grew up in Northern Virginia. There's no place that we call North Springfield. And it was funny because we started to see North Springfield as a location, and we could start to use that to track people that were fake. Additionally, there's little minor things like you'll see pictures of people driving and the steering wheel will be on the wrong side of the car, which immediately tells you if you're in the UK or if you're in the US that, this person isn't local or the picture is fake. We also found fashion suits and shoots, and product photos was another big one. This one I particularly laugh at because, again, the pictures here oftentimes are just innocent third parties. They'll grab something off of Facebook, they'll grab something from a fashion shoot. This happens to be a actress, Hilary Duff. So I think she has an album now too as well. But, I love that you can go find the picture. So here's Hilary Duff's original photo with Visine, and here's where they used it for Rosalina on a fake profile. We also found things like earrings, dresses, coats, purses, haute couture, high fashion, etc. If it looks like an advertisement or a photo shoot, it probably is. You know, this one in particular, this is a Parker dress, and that's a, I think, Coach purse. You can oftentimes use things like reverse image searches, but we are starting to see where these techniques aren't just used in dating scams. Even Zynga is a real company, and I posted about this a few years ago on LinkedIn, used fake female AI accounts. They created fake females, and they would reach out to get gullible men to play. I don't know if they did it from female perspective. I only had the data for men, but these techniques are used, and we're starting to see concepts where they're using deep fakes and fake data as well. But right now it's easier for them to grab data. So I thought that would be a little bit of humor about the online dating as a initial start. So with that overview, that is the, I guess, 31 topics for today. Is there anybody in chat that wants to cover any specific topics? Yeah, or they're using Android. Yes, absolutely. Most features are in understanding, which makes it a better deal. Only big miss is S-MIME, but also orgs don't use it in the EU. Yes, agreed. And Education Plus is the same thing as well with Enterprise Plus. So I'll start with anybody. Paul, I'll ask you, is there a specific topic you'd like to know more about?
Just go back to the list, man. There's enough content. We don't know them by heart, all 30 now.
Oh, you know, please, come on. So I'll scroll through, somebody yell or raise a hand when we get through it. So
yeah, all already from the beginning. You got a few good ones that you said you
okay.
wanted to go back to them. Why not use biometrics? You didn't explain why.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that.
I know, but I want you to say it. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I'll hire you as my straight man, and you can tell people how good looking I am too. But biometrics. So I think multi-factor, most people understand it. I will point out that there are only 4 factors that I make sure that people use. If you're interested in more factors, I did a between the brackets speech a few years ago for Google. It's out on YouTube. Between the brackets and my name, should find it on YouTube easily. It's a 2-parter, and I talk about all the different factors that can be brought in. But if you are a super admin, you should be using physical tokens. But all users, in my opinion, should start with these 4 as their primary keys or the primary multiple factors. Now, if they're using something else, I will choose anything over not using multi-factor. But in a secure world, I would want to use physical tokens, followed by device push, followed by an authenticator app, and then followed by backup codes. And that's all I would use. There are reasons for that, but again, it's really, really secure. But that leads into why I don't suggest biometrics. The first part is it's really simple. If they're compromised, how do you change them? So, for example, when Face Lock came out from Apple, my son's photo, if I took a photo and curled it and jiggled it a little bit, would unlock the phone. My son could unlock the phone. Now, they did fix that, and I talked to Apple about it, and they made it. But my son could very easily pass for for my biometrics. Not to mention the fact that, you know, things like fingerprints, there has been some great articles both in Wired as well as Forbes where they have been able to take pictures with an SLR camera of somebody's fingerprints. I believe it was not the Reichstag, but one of the parliamentary buildings in Germany. They, with the permission, took a picture of one of the minister's fingerprints and then used a technique to go ahead and open that building. So a lot of biometrics also have very high error rates, and so they're oftentimes we could get into the technical science behind it, but they usually dial down what their error rate is so that, you know, they work quicker. So the final thing is they're oftentimes turned into either images or mathematical formulas or mathematical numbers. And like I said, if that gets compromised, how are you going to change it? And how are you going to protect it? And how are you going to protect it from, you know, are you going to wear gloves for the rest of your life if you're going to use fingerprints? Because I will tell you the techniques are not hard to take fingerprints and trick ones that even look for live pulses in fingerprints. All right, I'll continue on. Dedicated accounts, I don't think that one requires a whole lot. Just do it. One of the ones in here that sometimes helps is most people understand principle of least privilege. You know, don't give yourself more access than you need to do your job. Separation of duties is something that a lot of people don't work on. And this comes down to some pretty harsh things. You know, it's hard to get collusion. It's hard to have more than one person involved in a crime. And so in certain high-end sectors, finance, for example, they will require that you take a certain number of weeks of vacation every year. And you can't do anything on the systems because scams fall apart unless you have a partner. And I think we have a hand raised.
Yeah, we do. It's Danny. You've got a question?
Yes. Okay. First of all, thank you, Kevin, for a very comprehensive list. I actually is not a security guy, so this is very helpful for me. And regarding to the 14, the audit, could you please go to the audit? I mean, the number 14.
Number 14, sure, I can do that. I will comment real quickly before I jump to that on the, we do have some people talking about the Advanced Protection Program. I'll come back to that one as well. So I'll do number 14, and I'll do the Advanced Protection Program. By the way, these will be published as a blog publicly with Spin.
Yes, so I have a scenario like this. Suppose that I and you work within one environment, Google Workspace environment, and I will leave the company, and you know that I have a lot of Google Apps script or AppSheet application, and on that kind of projects, I can set up a lot of hyperlink and also trigger to send the email from my own email, right? So what are the best practices to audit that kind of risk? That's my question.
Yeah, I'll add that to the list. So I've got number 14. I've got Advanced Protection Program. I've got your question around best practices there. By the way, Mark Laundy, it was not Angela Merkel. It was another director that was used for the hack of like the Reichstag in Germany. It was one of the parliamentary buildings and a lower director, but it's funny that you mentioned Angela Merkel because that's who I often use I use her picture to bring up the example because people don't know it, but I can look up the exact name there. Peter, you get bonus there for mentioning a Dremel to take care of the fingerprints. I like that. Shadow IT and processes for getting in front of this. So we'll come back to Shadow IT and I'll put your question there from DMA. Let's see what we got there. So, and let's see, we had a user get phished. They entered their credentials into a site. Problem arose when they approved the login attempt on their phone without thinking. Yeah, unfortunately, in my 30+ year career though, I've only worked on 3 cases where multi-factor authentication was hacked. I've worked on several where social engineering was used to bypass it. But I do like to point out that one of those ones where where the two-factor was hacked involved $32 million worth of Bitcoin being stolen, and they bribed AT&T employees. So there's certainly situations where MFA can be worked around. It is not foolproof, but it does stop a ton of attacks. And for example, if they hadn't hit the phone without thinking, it would have done it. So, and we have 14 also voted for again, and then 4 and 5. So we're going over 4 now. So we'll come back. We'll probably do 5 next, and then this was makes me nervous about device push. Tapping yes becomes memory muscle. Or muscle memory. I do often. I like the ones where you got to type in a number, things like that, but telling people never pass that along. Cloudflare crash. I'm not sure, Kim, with the MFA fatigue and the particular Cloudflare crash. I'm actually not a huge fan of Cloudflare. They are used in the anti-spam world. They are used so much to protect bad actors. It's not even funny. So I probably can't comment on that one particularly. And then minister's fingerprints using photos of her own hand. So thank you. What about the move to passkeys? So if passkeys are backed by biometrics, I'm against them, Steve, just to let you know. And that is where I'll go into passphrases and where that's in there. And some of the stuff, like for example, biometrics and passphrases, I might be disagreeing with some other experts in there, but I try and give you the background behind where I came to that. So But continuing on with number 4 here for a second on the separation of duties, having multiple people that have to do something. So, for example, somebody writes the policy, somebody else writes the procedure, another person then implements the procedure. That would be a very good way to ensure that multiple people get their eyes on it and one person can't do something nefarious. Multi-party approval is also great. That's where you can require things in Google Workspace that you have to 2 people approve the change. This is fantastic as well. I think a lot of people on this call would appreciate this. Say you're hiring somebody who's fairly junior and you want to start letting them be an administrator in a live environment. Well, it's great to tell it to do it and turn it on, but require multi-party approval, because then anything they change requires another person to approve it. But you can start giving them the kind of the one of the keys to the castle, and they need somebody else to turn the key at the same time. Great use of multi-party approval. Enterprise Plus is one of the SKUs that adds that. A lot of people did ask about passwords and passphrases. I will bring this open. So XKCD does a fantastic description of this with passphrases, and this is several years old. But I will bring it up on the screen because it is so accurate. So this is the comic. I'll give you guys a few minutes to read it, but the key point is Troubadour is a password that a lot of people think is very secure. The reality is it has 28 bits of entropy. 4 randomly selected lowercase English words actually have 44 bits of entropy. You can ignore the rest of this document. You can ignore the math. They give some assumptions on here around it. But the point is 44 bits of entropy versus 28 bits of entropy is many powers of 10 harder to hack. In this particular example, using the assumptions, you're talking about 3 days versus 550 years. I go a little bit further and say passphrases, you can use things that are very easy to remember. Any password you have to write down is less secure. And if you have something like, for example, you've probably been told not to use your anniversary as a password. Well, that's in the days of pins where you'd use, like 0101 as your pin. They're not talking about, like, for example, I tell people, make your password, my wedding anniversary is January 1st, 2026. And the nice part about that is it's extremely long. The entropy on it is extraordinarily high. You don't need to write it down. You'll remember it, and you'll remember your wedding anniversary. So if you forget to buy flowers or chocolates on that day, you're just you're out of luck. But this is the concept of passphrases, and the passphrases is not only scientifically valid. Microsoft has done a study on it, but in addition, in NIST, starting several years ago with the 863B, which is the Digital Identity Guidelines, they wrote this text. This is directly quoted from this section here. And it just basically says, recommend against the use of composition rules, uppercase, lowercase, digits, and special characters. They're not more secure. They make people do things in a way that's less secure. That's the science is very well founded on that. Additionally, don't require periodic changes. If you're requiring people to change passwords every 30 days, every 60 days without any reason, there is no reason to do that. In the newer revisions of the 863, they changed memorized secrets to passwords just to make it easier for people. But you'll notice it's very clear. Verifiers should not, and they've made it stronger in Rev 4. You'll find it in Rev 4, which was released in July of last year, and it is now the recommended version. You'll find that in Volume B under Section 3112. So if you want chapter and verse about why passwords aren't very good, but passphrases are, this is a way to do it. And I particularly love using unique passphrases. One thing I do is I start to use something like a favorite song lyric. That's my base passphrase. And then I add something to each site that I can remember easily. So I have a unique password / passphrase. It's my base one. And then, for example, Amazon, I know something I would add at the end based on an algorithm that I keep in my head. And unless you are really, really good and have a lot of my different passwords, you're not going to figure out what I add to that baseline passphrase. So I end up with one thing to memorize, one algorithm to memorize, and I have passwords that are extraordinarily secure and never have to be written down, because I like password managers, but I don't recommend most people use them. The only one that I recommend most people use is Passbolt, because you can run it on your own ecosystem and you can keep it offline, for example. The problem with all of them is that they are a target. there's a lot of data in there. I think it was Norton that had the solution that they actually had a backdoor because so many of their customers would lose their master password. So that hack of the Norton that occurred several years ago not only got, they got them in clear text effectively because there was a reverse engineer, or there was a algorithm to reverse encryption. You want to use salting, you want to use encryption / hashing, if you will, is the right one. But you can look at these NIST cybersecurity guidelines, the 800-171. I do joke about my wedding anniversary there being the passphrase. So a little bit about passphrases. Let's continue down to the next one that was asked about. So
I had a comment before, Kevin.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so if you don't want to remember that many passwords or have a special super cool way to do it like you did, I also have a variant of that. It is of course to use a password manager, and then you only have to remember 2 passwords.
The problem again is they become a target, and whether they compromise your machine or whether they compromise the system behind it.
Yeah, but then again, most of them you have to figure out where is your real target. So you aren't always the target of China state or Russia state. And there's a difference.
Absolutely,
in what kind you're working with.
No, I do recognize that, and I do tell people. I've worked in facilities where you approach through a 100 yard tunnel with signs in 7 languages that say approach, and if you're unrecognized you'll be shot on sight. And every time I go to places like that, I don't go there as much anymore, but I'd always be like, did I shave this week? It's me, don't shoot. And you come up with this rise and there's a person behind a bulletproof glass with an M4 with finger on the trigger. So it's there are levels of security that thankfully most people never have to deal with. For example, with pins, like most people are familiar with pins with ATM cards or with credit cards. I've worked at systems where I not only had to use a pin, I also had to memorize a silent alarm pin. So I could enter a secondary pin that would set off alarms. So it's a big problem there. So barcodes and QR codes, don't use them. QR codes, by their very definition, are a security problem because they obscure the end result. The only situations where I like using them is where it's very clear that you can read the URL before you go to it. There have been so many hacks and problems. I just learned about one in Atlanta about a year ago where they had gone around to all the public parking and they had put a sticker over top of the QR codes with a fake QR code, and people were paying their parking fees to the wrong place. So can't get started on how bad QR codes are. I'm glad to hear that Keys, John, that you use the comic all the time. First sentence of a favorite book. A favorite book, a favorite song, because it's very long and you choose it and it's not specifically like 4 words, the varieties are endless as to what you can pick. The password, thank you for the comment. Your goal this year in 1 sentence, you've done it, it's called NLP. Yeah, thank you.
Anyway,
Danny,
my main point was that was my second password. The first password is your main account in your life, which may not be your work account, but actually your private account should never be something that you have to write down. Just like you said, your main account's password is something you remember always. It should never be stored anywhere at all.
Yeah, and absolutely, and
that's your base for entering everything else. So
that's your gold standard. But as I mentioned, password managers and single repositories, they become targets. So any type of password manager, most people aren't aware of the fact that, like, for example, with Firefox, you can set a master password. I like the concept of using master passwords, but I don't use a lot of situations there. I do like the AI generated passwords. I don't know about using that. Again, anything that's predictable is bad. Quishing, so QR code phishing.
Peter, got a question?
Yeah, I'm trying to scroll as fast as I can. There are a lot of them in here.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
more
yeah.
like an add-on to the password manager. I do agree that it's not the best solution, but in a security type of thing for regular users, I sort of use the approach that you use for the MFA. If they don't use anything else, I rather prefer that they use a password manager. Even somebody mentioned it in the comments, the Google Password Manager, because then at least they have a different password on each site, because else users tend to use the exact same password for every service they use. So if anything else, let them use a password manager. It's far better than they use the same password everywhere or something very predictable.
You know, many people who go through ATOs with me will get into this 50+ document, which is ATO-isms, which I've got to finish this one. But these are the one-liners, you know, but one of the big ones you'll see is, what do you call it? Perfection will be in here. Don't let perfection get in the way of progress. And you need to be better, not perfect. This is so relevant in so many things. If you're trying to lose weight, don't worry about it until you can go to the gym 7 times a week. Just start doing something today. It will have benefits. So again, yeah, if password managers are better than somebody writing it on a sticky note, I'm going to choose better over perfect. Don't ever discount that better is a measurable success. So 100% agree. All right, so number 5, I think we talked about. Let's see, let's go up to number 14. That was requested. Audit third-party apps and APIs connected via OAuth. Don't have a whole lot in here right now about it. I generally, unfortunately, go into the audit. I pull the list. I do a sort by IDs, and I just start looking at it. But a little bit of a pitch for Spin. One of the reasons I like Spin Backup is that they have kind of evolved into a cybersecurity company. Backups have always been a part of a cybersecurity plan, but in particular, they do a couple of things. First of all, Spin is referenced in Google's knowledge bases as the largest database of extensions available out there. There are over 400,000 in it, and they do some really neat things. So for example, with Spin Backup, one of the things they say is, you know, anybody here has done migrations or used tools or used Google's APIs, know you start getting into API limits. And if you have 100,000 items to restore, and Google starts rate limiting you to like a minute per API call, you're literally at 100,000 minutes before you're going to be back up and running. So their whole idea is they have tools that look for malware that's running on Google Drive, so they can shut down the malware, and then you're restoring 100 files, not 100,000 files, as just complete chosen examples. But I would say that, you know, when I'm looking at third-party apps and APIs, I am typically looking at third-party tools. Spin does have some free tools that are allowed, so they do have a freemium plan. You can come use some of their tooling for free and then upgrade. So I would probably start with Spin and some of the other tools that are out there. Over the years, I love Better Cloud, I love CloudLock, I love Spin One. Different cost prices for some of these, and they may not be attainable for all of your customers. You know, with, for example, Better Cloud, I'm normally not looking at that until they have 2 IT people and a $50,000 budget for something like that. That's not going to be achievable by everybody out there. So that's my answer about the third-party apps.
Hey, Kevin.
Yes.
Real quick, this is Chuck from Cloud9. Wanted to follow up on Danny's question about number 14. He had a longer comment in the chat.
Yeah, is that the one about the best practices for it?
App sheets, I think specifically, and the auto replies for app sheets, and the bad guys using that as a ploy. Danny, am I getting that right? But how that might kind of play? How do we combat against something like that?
Yeah, and that's what I was just about to go into here. So I think it ties into this. So this answer right now is written from the point of AI agents, but anytime I'm doing any development, whether it's app script, whether it's low code, whether it's no code, whether it's AI agents, I always treat it as a software project. And to do that, I treat it with full software development lifecycle, meaning I want an owner identified, I want requirements identified, I want to know who's going to maintain it, I want to know who's going to maintain the security on it, and who's going to shut it down. Otherwise, we get lots of problems, and this is exactly, I think, what he's talking about. I don't know about the specific spoofs of app scripts, but that is a problem. but also knowing that tools, people leave the company and all these app scripts stop running is something that we've dealt with a lot. And, you know, as I said, we see tools where somebody owns it, nobody owns it, the person's left, it stops working, or it has a security problem, and what's the requirement? So we look at it from the standpoint of owning even low code, no code solutions as a product and all of the SDLC. So the answer I normally give people about those type of risks is, you know, try and bring some framework around when your users use these tools. This again comes back a little bit to the shadow IT, which will now lead into, because shadow IT, you want users to understand what's going on. And this is normally what I tell about, is that lawyers avoid risk by just saying no. Your goal is to figure out how to say yes. A user comes to you and says, I want to use Gemini. I don't want to hear an answer that just says our company policy doesn't allow it. I want to see you say, it's important for us. These are game-changing tools. If we don't allow it, users are going to use it anyway. So I want to understand it, control it, document it, etc. And it's the same thing with script. And so Simon Sinek writes these books in the marketing world, The Start With Why. I have stolen it for years in cybersecurity. I try to explain why I'm doing things like MFA. I try and get users to understand that I'm not trying to make their life difficult as a cybersecurity person, and that, you know, I try and get their help. Like, for example, they come to me and say, hey, I would like to, you know, do this product, and I'd like to use this tool. I will sometimes be able to say, here is 2 other tools we have that you can look at. Sometimes I will ask users, hey, can you spend an hour and come back with an analysis on that tool? Is it secure? Is it something we should buy? How much would it cost? And what's often interesting, by bringing users into that kind of process, I often have them come back and say, dear God, there's no way we should ever enable this. I can't believe I ever asked. That is almost verbatim a direct quote that I've gotten more than once from users. You know, but sometimes you have to point them, like, no, you shouldn't use ChatGPT. We're using Gemini. It's included in our licensing. And here is the compliance standards that Google follows, that when you're using a free version of ChatGPT, I often use the quote that you probably know, which is, if you aren't paying for the product, you are the product. So, you know, I do have to worry about how a company, not throwing any shade on ChatGPT, they have commercial versions as well, but I don't know their terms and conditions. I don't know their architecture for security. And especially, I would assume that if you're not paying for the product, that I have to worry that that data could be used in training models, at which point I should not be using my customers' data or anything sensitive in that data. So that's a little bit about how I solve that with the, you know, kind of the idea of what are the processes for these, for avoiding shadow IT. This is some of the idea about how as well that I bring SDLC for things like app script. And this is just going to grow when users are able to just go write a script. In fact, I just gave a training this morning for a company. They wrote an app script on Google Sheets, and now other people are using it. So from my standpoint, we have to now retrofit that into an SDLC. Who owns it? Where is it documented? Sometimes it's very simple. We put a link in the actual spreadsheet that says, you know, this uses this app script. If you have questions, contact this person. You know, that can be a simple place to start. Let's see, I think Advanced Protection Program. So APP is another one to go over. So the Advanced Protection Program is by Google. It was originally designed from memory, but I'm pretty sure this is right, for reporters who were especially working in very dangerous locations. They didn't want them hacked. And it got extended later on to other people, activists, politicians, and then eventually they made it free for anybody to use it, and it can be brought in for executives. What it does is it brings requirements for using secure tokens. It limits third-party access, and it has extra scrutiny at various steps, like, for example, for account recovery and risky downloads. So you're not going to be able to recover an account, even if you have account recovery turned on, for somebody that's in the Advanced Protection Program. The idea being that they're part of a workspace. There's policies, there's security desks, there's other ways to do recovery that you would never use anything automated. I do like to also mention, I'm not a fan of Titan keys because they're manufactured in China. In many of the environments I work on, we cannot use them. YubiKeys do have of keys that will meet certain requirements. And as far as I know, to this day, all of their materials are made in USA and Sweden, and you can buy certain versions that are guaranteed to be made, for example, in the United States, as far as security goes. So the Advanced Protection Program, as far as I know, is completely free, other than the fact that you do want to buy tokens for it. Google will recommend you have two. One is a backup. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of that. I think that's a perfection versus progress. If I give just one token and then we have the help desk and our support people that could help them recover the account, that'd be good enough. But if they're using things other than Google Workspace and they're putting all these passkeys or all of these, if they're using that physical token for more than just Google Workspace, you might want to have a backup of it. But it goes down to that list I made of having backup codes for every single multi-factor authentication. Let me look in chat and see if there's others. So I did. Let's see where we're at. I noticed there's some comments about GDPR. Okay, I think Chuck got a good answer for him. We have the security annex. Boy, there's a lot of comments in here. I don't know if I can do all of them. Slowest person with a tiger or a bear. He is educating. All right, I might miss a few of these. I'm going to start at the ones about 15 minutes ago and see if I can get it there. Yeah, Andy, unfortunately, the dating advice was just me kind of throwing in a joke about my dating experience. Live through my my flaws. As my dad once asked me when he bailed me out of jail the second time, he asked me if I was going to learn everything the hard way all the time. So that's just one of those lessons you can learn from me learning it the hard way. Yes, start of Chrome OS. I'm looking very quickly here. Yeah, allow only configured extensions, marketplace add-ons, and disallow API access from unknown sources. Absolutely, can be very good. And yeah, I like spanning as well. We're an ISV with spanning. I like them. Backups are important. I really like the evolution that Spin is bringing to backups, where they're doing things like their SRST, their extension blocking. They're doing things that are more in the cybersecurity space, which just add on top of the backups. And I make a not very funny joke, which is that backups are important, but restores are critical. I can't tell you how many times people think they have backups and they don't. Vault is a great example. I believe this is still the case. Vault by default does not store shared drives. And people all the time just think shared drives is in there. And until they have a problem or they have an e-discovery need, then they find out the hard way that shared drives isn't on there. I will share my screen and switch to let me share my entire screen, and I'll show you what I mean about that as the last topic, just because it is pretty important. So I'm going to go to my sandbox for Google, and I'm trying to get there, sorry. And I'm going to log in as admin. Close those down so they don't come up. Takes a minute when you launch another profile, unfortunately. And I don't have my key downstairs for the presentation, so I'll do the try another way. I am doing the device push. And yes, it's me. So in here, I'm going to go in another tab. I'm going to go to Vault or ediscovery.google.com. I'm going to go to retention. And this is a very old account, so it's going to show you some things that have been done for a long time. But this one's just an example. So you have this duration that's indefinitely for Gmail. If we go to Drive, for example, we can see that it's indefinite. But if we go now to custom rules, you will notice that you can set up chat, which didn't used to exist, and you can set up a rule for all shared drives. And if you haven't set up a custom rule, and I don't think shared drives is by default any of these things, chat is. This chat rule didn't used to exist. You used to have to create a custom rule for chat. But Yeah, and chat's very complicated. If it's involving an outside sender, an internal recipient, it gets complicated. But just make sure that you've kind of created a custom rule that covers shared drives. I normally say it's easy to protect the data you don't have, so I don't like indefinite rules. Just your mileage will vary as to what you're using Vault for, but I will leave you with the fact that shared drives might not be in Vault if you didn't set up a custom rule for it. All right, Paul, back over to you. That's probably all I can cover in 1 hour. Obviously, I can talk about this for days and go through all of these, including the dating one. I could probably give you 2 hours of rants. And I had the pleasure of meeting Cecilia, who's the lady who was taken by the Tinder swindler and whatnot. So I don't know if she had a chance to make it. I invited her today to come heckle me on that portion, but her stuff is far better than my little dating advice stuff. So.
Awesome. I appreciate the time again, Cam. I kind of expect that there's going to be call for you to publish that, or at least come back and talk a bit more, maybe later on in the year, which you know, having your time is extremely valuable to the community. I know at the top of the hour, anybody got any quick questions that they'd like to ask? Otherwise, I will let you all get out of here pretty pronto. Going to do a countdown. No hands are up. Okay, so really appreciate everyone's time this afternoon, this morning. Again, wherever you are, appreciate you find the time. An hour is a long time to spend with you know, us all. Hopefully, you found this useful. I know I did from a Google Vault perspective. That's one of the things that I'm going to be telling customers to look at and get set up immediately. So with that, I appreciate your time, and yeah, we'll see you on the next one at the end of March. So yeah, thank you very much for all your time.